I was still clapping for the last group of graduates when my phone buzzed. A single text from my son lit up the screen. "Don't expect help." My hands froze. The auditorium's cheers faded into a dull roar in my ears. Just minutes ago, I thought I was here to celebrate him, but now it felt like he'd drawn a line I couldn't cross. My throat tightened as I looked toward the stage, where he stood straight and proud, without glancing at me once. For decades, I believed every late night at the office, every missed birthday, every hurried phone call was an investment in his future. I had the money, the house, the career title people respected, but what I didn't have, what I had slowly traded away, was the right to stand in my own son's corner without feeling like a stranger. I had chosen boardrooms over baseball games, conference calls over bedtime stories, and now, in the most important moment of his life, I realized he hadn't just grown up, he had grown apart. Then, as I sat there sinking into the weight of that truth, my phone rang again. The caller ID read the name of my former CEO, a man I hadn't spoken to in years. "Michael," his voice came through, calm and deliberate. "There's an award in your name. They want to present it publicly." My son's text still burned in my mind. An award in my name? For what? Sacrificing the people who mattered most? Yet something in his voice told me this was more than a trophy. Maybe, just maybe, this call could open a door I thought was forever closed. I was born in a town where the most exciting thing that happened was when the grocery store got a new neon sign. My father died when I was 7, a sudden heart attack on a Tuesday afternoon. My mother picked up 3 jobs to keep food on the table: nights at the diner, cleaning offices at dawn, and sewing for neighbors in between. I learned early that if I wanted more from life, I would have to claw my way up and never stop moving. At college, I met Claire. She had this quiet grace, the kind that made you want to stand up straighter in her presence. She believed in me before I had anything to offer, before the suits, before the corner office. We would sit in the campus cafe, scribbling dreams on napkins, travel to Italy, buy a little house with a porch, raise a family that never worried about bills. I promised her I'd give her all of it, even more. After graduation, I got my first job in finance. Entry-level, small desk by the copy machine, but I wore my only suit like armor. Promotions came quickly. I stayed later than anyone else, studied the market trends until my eyes burned, and made sure my bosses knew my name. Then, on a business trip to Chicago, the CEO, gray suit, gold cufflinks, pulled me aside after a meeting. "You'll replace me someday," he said, eyes sharp, voice certain. The words rooted deep inside me, part compliment, part prophecy. I didn't know it then, but they would become the engine driving every decision I made. At first, life felt balanced. I worked hard, but I came home for dinner most nights. Claire and I laughed over burnt pasta, painted the nursery when she was pregnant, read bedtime stories to our son, Daniel. I felt like I was keeping my promises, both to her and to myself. But then the stakes got higher. The firm expanded overseas, and with expansion came opportunity. I took on bigger accounts, stayed later, traveled more. Claire's smile when I left for the airport became thinner, her hugs tighter, like she was holding on to something slipping away. By the time Daniel was 8, the balance was tilting. I started missing the small things: parent-teacher conferences, Saturday morning pancakes, the occasional school play. "It's temporary," I told Claire. "Just until the next promotion." She nodded, but her eyes said she'd heard it before. One evening, as I was packing for yet another trip, Daniel stood in the doorway holding his soccer cleats. "Dad, will Will you come to my game this Saturday? His voice was so hopeful it felt fragile in the air. I knelt, ruffled his hair, and promised I'd be there. Saturday came. I was in a glass tower hundreds of miles away, closing a deal that would double my department's profits. My phone buzzed mid-meeting. Claire's text. He scored the winning goal. There was a blurry photo attached. Daniel grinning, teammates lifting him in the air. And there I was, absent, not even in the frame. A week later, my boss called me into his office. Outstanding work, he said, sliding an envelope across the desk. Inside was a bonus check so large I had to blink twice. I should have felt elated. Instead, I remembered that grainy photo of my son, and the hollowness in my chest spread just a little further. I had won and lost in the same breath. Claire didn't mention the game again, but something had shifted. She stopped asking when I'd be home. She stopped leaving my plate in the oven just in case. I told myself it was fine, that we'd take a family trip soon, that all of this was for them. I didn't see it then, but the cage I was building wasn't made of gold. It was made of my absence. And the bars were getting thicker with every deal I closed. I came home from a week in Hong Kong to find the house unusually quiet. Claire was in the living room, rolling up a yoga mat, her hair pulled back in a way I hadn't seen in years. She smiled politely, the kind you give a neighbor you barely know, then told me she had joined a morning yoga group. "It's good to get out," she said, "to see friends." Daniel was in his room, door half shut, typing furiously on his laptop. "Hey, champ," I called. He waved without looking up. On his desk was a pile of books, scripts by the look of them, but I didn't think much of it. I assumed it was schoolwork and let it go. Over the next few months, a subtle but undeniable shift took place. Claire filled her calendar with yoga classes, lunches, and outings with friends from her studio. Daniel handled his own homework, his own meals sometimes, even his laundry. I told myself this was good. He was becoming independent, self-reliant. But the truth was, they were learning to function without me, and I was letting them. One Thursday night, while rummaging through the kitchen for a late snack, I noticed a program on the counter. It was for the school's winter theater production. My eyes froze on the cast list. Daniel's name, right there in bold. Lead role. I felt an odd jolt. My son was in the theater. He'd always been into sports. Or maybe that's just what I remembered from years ago. How long had I been out of the loop? When I asked Claire about it the next morning, she shrugged. He auditioned months ago. He's good at it. There was a pause. You've been busy. I wanted to say I could make it to the performance, but my travel schedule was already set. Tokyo, then London. I'd missed the opening night. Claire, perhaps sensing my discomfort, suggested we see a marriage counselor. Just a few sessions, she said, to talk about things. I barely looked up from my laptop. Claire, I'm swamped. Let's do it after this quarter is over. She didn't argue, but her silence felt like the kind you don't recover from. A week later, I came home late again. Daniel had left a card on my desk, a handmade invitation to his first performance. I didn't see it until the next morning, when my suitcase was already packed. I was boarding a plane to London that evening. I told myself I'd FaceTime him after the show, but by the time I landed, it was too late. The message on my voicemail was short. It went well. Mom recorded it. His tone was flat, like a business update. During a client dinner overseas, my oldest friend Tom leaned in over his wine glass. We'd known each other since college, back when life felt infinite and uncomplicated. Mike, he said, his voice low, you keep this up. One day they won't need you. Not for anything. And you won't know when it happened. Until it's already done. I laughed it off, waving away the warning. Come on, Tom. This is just a busy season. They know I'm doing this for them. But his eyes didn't change. They held a truth I wasn't ready to face. When I returned home from that trip, Claire and Daniel were in the kitchen, talking and laughing over dinner. I stepped in, suitcase still in hand, and both conversations and laughter stopped. Daniel nodded politely, like greeting a colleague, and excused himself to finish homework. Claire went back to eating, not asking about my trip. The silence that followed was not angry, just indifferent. In the weeks that followed, the walls became invisible but impenetrable. We still lived under the same roof, still exchanged pleasantries, but the warmth was gone. Meals were eaten at different times. Conversations were functional, stripped of any unnecessary detail. I realized that when I walked into a room, I was entering their space, not ours. One evening, I sat alone in the living room, flipping through TV channels. Claire walked past with her gym bag, heading out for an evening yoga class. Don't wait up, she said casually. Daniel was upstairs, probably memorizing lines for his next play, a world I wasn't part of. The hum of the refrigerator was the only sound in the house. I told myself there would be time to fix this, after the next project, after the next promotion, after something. But deep down, I could feel it. Time was moving in one direction, and I was always a few steps behind the people who mattered most. The morning of Daniel's graduation, I was halfway through tying my tie when my phone lit up. It was the firm's senior partner. Mike, the Tokyo deal is on the line, he said without preamble. We need your approval before noon to close. This is a 7-figure contract. I glanced at the clock. The ceremony started in less than an hour. The school was across town, traffic was heavy, and my name had been printed on the reserved seating list next to Claire's and Daniel's grandparents. Still, the deal was too big to ignore. Give me 30 minutes, I told him, already loosening my tie. 30 minutes became an hour, and by the time I left the office, the ceremony was well underway. I parked 2 blocks away and jogged toward the auditorium, the sound of applause and cheering floating out into the warm June air. As I stepped through the side doors, I saw them, Daniel, Claire, and her parents, standing together for photos. Daniel's smile was wide, but his eyes didn't scan the crowd for me. There was an empty space where I should have been. I pulled out my phone, thinking I could snap a picture, maybe catch his attention. That's when the screen lit up with a new message. Don't expect help. My stomach dropped. It was blunt, cold, and final in a way I'd never felt from him before. My fingers went numb as I read it again. Before I could move, my phone rang. The caller ID made me blink. Richard Hale, my former CEO, the man who'd once told me I could replace him. We hadn't spoken in years. Michael, he said, his voice steady. There's an award being given in your name. Lifetime achievement. They want to present it publicly next month. For a moment, I didn't know whether to laugh or curse. An award in my name. Today of all days. My son had just drawn a line in the sand, and here was the pinnacle of my career, arriving like a cruel joke. Richard must have sensed my hesitation. It's a big honor, he added. You should be proud. I slipped the phone back into my pocket and looked across the lawn. Daniel was laughing with his friends now, the moment between us already gone. Claire caught my eye from a distance, her expression unreadable, then turned away. Later that evening, back at the house, Claire was at the kitchen counter pouring herself tea. She didn't look up when I entered. "You have everything, Michael," she said evenly. "Everything but a family." I tried to protest, to explain that the deal had been urgent, that I'd rushed as fast as I could. But the words sounded hollow, even to me. Daniel walked in then, a thin folder in his hand. "I made a list," he said, flipping it open. His voice was steady, almost rehearsed. "Every time you promised something and didn't show. My first soccer championship, the winter play, parent night in 5th grade, my college tour, and today." He closed the folder and looked me in the eye. "It's not about one day, Dad. It's all of them." The weight of his words pressed down on me harder than any boardroom failure. "Daniel, I can fix this," I started. He shook his head. "No, you can't. Not where I'm going." I frowned. "What do you mean?" "I've been accepted into a program in Oregon," he said. "I'm moving there next week, full time." Mom knew. He glanced at her, then back at me. "I didn't tell you because, well, what difference would it make?" It was like the floor gave way beneath me. "You're leaving right after graduation?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Yes, I'm starting fresh." His tone left no opening for negotiation. Claire set her cup down, the quiet click loud in the silence that followed. "He needs space, Michael. And maybe you do too. Think about what you've been chasing and what it's cost." Daniel walked upstairs without another word. I stood there in the kitchen, the house feeling too big, too quiet. The award in my name, the deal I'd closed, the years I'd spent building a career. They all seemed meaningless against the reality that my son was walking out of my life, not in anger, but in resignation. And for the first time, I wasn't sure there was a way back. 2 days after Daniel's graduation, I sat at my desk in the corner office. The skyline spread out in front of me like a trophy I no longer wanted. The plaque on the wall, the leather chair, the glass desk, none of it mattered. I typed my resignation letter with a steady hand, printed it, and walked it down the hallway. When I handed it to the board chair, he stared at me as if I'd lost my mind. "You're weeks away from accepting the highest honor in the industry," he said. "And you're walking away?" "Yes," I replied. "I've already lost more than I can replace. The award doesn't change that." News traveled fast. By the end of the day, colleagues were stopping by my office asking if it was true. Some shook their heads in disbelief. Others clapped me on the back like I'd done something brave. I didn't feel brave. I just felt late. That evening, I told Claire in the kitchen. She listened without interrupting, her arms folded. "I'm not taking the award," I said. "I quit. I want to spend my time with you and Daniel." Her face didn't soften. "We're going away for a while," she said. "Daniel and I, just a few weeks, maybe more. We'll see how long this new version of you lasts." The words stung, but I didn't argue. She had every reason not to believe me. The next morning, I woke up to a quiet house. Their suitcases were gone, and so were they. On the counter, a note in Claire's handwriting. "Take care of yourself. We'll see how it goes." For the first time in years, I had nothing scheduled. No meetings, no flights, no late-night calls. The silence was almost unbearable. I started small. I cooked breakfast for myself, then lunch. I burned the eggs twice and nearly set off the smoke alarm. I found a list of household repairs that had been sitting in a drawer for months and decided to tackle them. Fixing the leaky faucet in the kitchen took me 2 hours, but I felt strangely proud when the drip finally stopped. In the afternoons, I volunteered at a local food bank. The work was simple, packing boxes, loading shelves, but it felt grounding. People there didn't care about my resume or my former title. They cared that I showed up. I called Daniel every evening. Sometimes he answered, sometimes he didn't. When he did, the conversations were short, polite updates, nothing more. "How's Oregon?" I asked once. "It's fine," he said. "Busy." Then, after a pause, "Gotta go, Dad." Still, I kept trying. I sent him photos of the meals I cooked, updates on the repairs I finished, hoping he'd see I was serious. A month in, I sat down with a stack of bank statements. That's when I realized how deep the financial strain ran. Without my salary, our expenses were bleeding through savings faster than I'd imagined. The mortgage on the big house, the maintenance, the property taxes. It was too much. I called Claire to tell her. "We can't keep the house," I said. "We'll have to sell." There was a long silence on the other end. "Do what you have to do," she said finally. "It's just a building." Listing the house felt like closing a chapter I hadn't been ready to end. Strangers walked through rooms filled with our family's history. The kitchen where Daniel took his first steps. The porch where Claire and I used to drink coffee on quiet mornings. The day we accepted an offer, I stood in the empty living room, listening to the echo of my footsteps. I thought of all the nights I'd walked in late, briefcase in hand, assuming there would always be another chance to make it right. Now, the chances were dwindling, but I wasn't done fighting for them, not yet. It was a Tuesday morning when my phone buzzed with an unexpected text from Daniel. "You free this weekend?" I stared at the screen, half worried it was a mistake. "Yes," I typed back. "Why?" "Fishing trip, just us." The last time we'd gone fishing together, he was 10 and barely tall enough to see over the side of the boat. Now he was a grown man inviting me. Not out of obligation, but by choice, even if tentative. Saturday came with crisp air and a sky so clear, it felt like the world was giving us a clean slate. We drove in near silence, the hum of the engine and the winding road filling the space between us. At the lake, he showed me how to rig the bait. Apparently, I'd forgotten everything I once taught him. We sat side by side on the dock, lines in the water, the quiet stretching out until he finally spoke. "I didn't think you'd actually quit," he said. "I didn't think I would either," I admitted. "But I had to. For you, for your mom, for me." He nodded, watching the ripples on the water. "It's different having you around. I'm still getting used to it." We didn't catch much that day, just a few small perch, but it felt like we'd pulled up something heavier, something that had been sunk for years. Over the next few weeks, I kept showing up. I cooked dinners. Even on nights, I burned the sauce. I joined Claire for morning walks, listening more than I talked. She seemed cautious, but I noticed the way her eyes softened when I was still there at the table after dinner. No phone in hand. No emails waiting. One evening, we sat down for a family meal, something that had once been routine and now felt like a fragile ceremony. Halfway through the chicken casserole, Daniel put down his fork. "I canceled the move," he said. Claire froze mid-bite. "What do you mean?" "I'm staying, at least for a while. Just trying it out," he said, looking at me. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. But it was an opening. My chest felt tight, like I'd been holding my breath for years. "That's good to hear," I managed, keeping my voice steady. We started building new habits together. Saturday mornings became grocery trips as a family. Claire suggested we revive our old Sunday pancake tradition. Daniel and I worked on small projects around the new, smaller house, fixing a squeaky door, planting herbs in the backyard. I proposed something one night as we cleared the dishes. How about we make one day a month our family day? No phones, no work, just us. Claire raised an eyebrow, but Daniel grinned. I'm in, he said. Slowly, the laughter came back. At first in small bursts, then in longer stretches. I caught myself memorizing these moments, storing them away like rare treasures. A month later, Daniel surprised me again. Hey, there's somewhere I want to take you, he said one Saturday morning. We ended up at a downtown hotel ballroom filled with people in suits. It took me a moment to recognize the setting, the industry award ceremony, the Lifetime Achievement Award, the one I'd refused. They kept it, Daniel said, handing me a program with my name printed across the page. I thought you should have it, but this time, you're not getting it alone. When they called my name, the applause washed over me in a way it never had before. Not because of the title or the recognition, but because as I walked to the stage, Daniel and Claire walked beside me. The presenter handed me the plaque, and for a moment, I saw the younger version of myself. The man chasing every deal, every promotion, thinking it was all for his family. Then I saw who I was now, a man holding the hands of the people who had almost slipped away. When I turned to face the audience, I didn't see industry peers or former colleagues. I saw my wife's steady gaze, my son's small smile, and I knew this was the real award. A year after I left the firm, I stood on a stage again. But this time, it wasn't for finance. Rows of faces filled the conference hall, not in suits and ties, but in casual clothes, notebooks in hand. The banner above me read, Work-Life Balance Summit. I adjusted the microphone and took a deep breath. I spent 30 years chasing numbers, I began, and I caught them. But I also lost more than I could measure. Birthdays, games, quiet nights with my family. I thought I was building a legacy in boardrooms. Turns out my real legacy was slipping away at the dinner table. I spoke about the night of Daniel's graduation, the text message that felt like a door slamming shut. I talked about quitting at the peak of my career, not as a noble act, but as a last chance to undo years of damage. Money can buy comfort, security, and even respect, I said, but it can't buy time, and it will never buy love. When the applause faded, a familiar figure approached the stage. Richard Hale, my former CEO, still carried himself like the man who'd once ruled the industry. He shook my hand firmly. I knew about Claire and Daniel, he said quietly. I heard things, saw it happening years ago. I frowned. Then why didn't you say something? I tried, in my way. That award, it wasn't just recognition, it was a test. I wanted to see if you'd choose the stage over the people waiting for you at home. I thought about that moment again. The call from Richard right after Daniel's message. The bitter timing. You set me up, I said, half smiling. I gave you a mirror, he replied. You just had to look. In the months that followed, I kept speaking at events, but they weren't about market trends or investment strategies. They were about presence, boundaries, and the cost of ambition when it goes unchecked. People approached me after talks. Young parents, overworked executives, even college students, saying they'd booked family trips, turned down overtime, or started having dinner at home again. At home, Daniel was charting his own course. One evening over coffee, he told me, I'm switching majors, counseling, I want to work with teens, especially the ones who, you know, don't really have their parents around. You mean kids like you were, I said softly. He nodded. If I can help even one kid avoid feeling like I did, it'll be worth it. I felt something swell in my chest. Pride, but also a quiet gratitude. My mistakes had shaped him, but so had the change I fought for. Months later, Daniel asked me to come to a small community event where he was giving a talk. I didn't expect much, maybe a modest gathering in a school gym. Instead, I walked into a packed room, my wife sitting front row, smiling. Halfway through his speech, Daniel paused. Before I finish, there's someone here I need to thank, he said. A lot of people know him as a businessman, but I know him as something else. My father, a man who almost lost his family, but fought his way back. He's not just my dad. He's my hero who showed up just in time. The audience turned toward me, applauding. I felt the same rush I had on that stage with the award. But this was different. There were no deals behind it, no profit margins, no shareholders. This was earned in late-night talks, in burnt dinners, in fishing trips, in simply being there. Later that night, as we walked to the car, Claire slipped her hand into mine. "You did it," she said. "No," I said, glancing at Daniel ahead of us. "We did it." And for the first time in decades, I knew my legacy wasn't in a plaque or a balance sheet. It was walking beside me, and it would last far longer than any deal I'd ever closed.